you have a message for the climate change skeptics and the big oil people?
Well, as far as climate change skeptic, I mean, I believe in the scientific method, and one should have a healthy skepticism of things in general, and if you approach things from a scientific standpoint, you always look at things probabilistically, not definitively. And so I think a lot of times, if somebody's a skeptic in the science community, what they're really saying is that they're not sure that it's 100% certain that this is the case. But that's not the point. The point is that is look at it from the other side. So what do you think the percentage chance is of this being catastrophic for some meaningful percentage of the Earth's population? Is it greater than 1%? Is it even 1%? If it is even 1%, why are we running this experiment?
Right,
because
you called it a Russian roulette. We're playing Russian roulette with the atmosphere.
We're playing Russian roulette, and as each year goes by, we're loading more rounds in the chamber. Mm-hmm. It's not wise. Mm-hmm. So that's and what makes it super insane is that we're going to run out of oil anyway. Like, it's not like there's some infinite oil supply. We're going to run out of it. So we know we have to get to a sustainable means of transportation no matter what. So why even run the experiment?
Right.
It's the world's dumbest experiment.
Right. Steve Jobs was and is a wonderful Silicon Valley icon. Is he someone that you've admired, and what have you learned from Steve's life and work?
Well, he's certainly someone I've admired. Although I did try to talk to him once at a party, and he was super rude to me. But I don't think it was me. I think it was sort of, off the course.
I think you weren't the first.
Yeah, not the first. No. It was, yeah, and I was actually there with, like, Larry Page is an old friend of mine. I've known Larry since before he got venture funding for Google, and Larry was the guy that introduced me to Steve Jobs. So it's not as like I'm going like and tugging on his coat, like, please talk to me. But so I was introduced by Larry Page. It's not bad. So. I mean, he obviously was an incredible guy and made fantastic products. And I don't know, there was like a certain the guy had a certain magic about him. Just sort of that was really inspiring. So I mean, I think that's really great.
Is there that magic that you try and emulate?
No, I think Steve Jobs is way cooler than I am. So
that third failure in a row. Mm-hmm. Did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up. I mean, I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.
8 weeks later, Musk bet the company on another flight.
We have liftoff.
And this time around, everything worked.
Perfect.
If that fourth launch hadn't worked, that would have been it. We would have not had the resources to mount a fifth.
Really liking what you do, whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. I'd say also if you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to. And if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think.
I think the reality of being president is that you're actually like the captain of a very huge ship and have a small rudder. Because obviously, if there was a button that a president could push that said economic prosperity, you'd be like, they're hitting that button real fast.
Full steam ahead, yeah.
You could measure the speed of light by how fast they press that button, because that's called the re-election button. So I'm not sure how much the president can really do, but I think I'm generally a fan of like minimal government interference in the economy. Like the government should be kind of like the referee, but not the player, and there shouldn't be too many referees.
Right.
There is an exception, which is when there's an unpriced externality, such as the CO2 capacity of the oceans and atmosphere. So when you have an unpriced externality, then the normal market mechanisms do not work, and then government
it's government's role to intervene in a way that's sensible. And the best way to intervene is to assign a proper price to whatever the common good is that's being consumed. And then
So you're saying there should be a tax on gas?
there should be a tax on carbon. You know, if the bad thing is carbon accumulation in the atmosphere, then there needs to be a tax on that. And then we can, that will, and then you can get rid of all subsidies and everything else. And it seems like logical that you should tax things that are most likely to be bad rather than, you know, like that's why we tax cigarettes and alcohol. Because those are probably bad for you. Certainly cigarettes are. And I think currently what we're doing right now, which is mining and burning trillions of tons of hydrocarbons that used to be buried very deep underground, and now we're sticking them in the atmosphere and running this crazy chemical experiment on the atmosphere. And then you've got the oil and gas companies, which have ungodly amounts of money. And you can't expect them to just roll over and die. Like, they don't do that. So actually what they much prefer to do is spend enormous amounts of money lobbying and running bogus ad campaigns and that kind of thing to preserve their situation.
I think the first is you need to work, depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like I mean, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. The other thing I'd say is that if you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. And I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. And then the final thing is to sort of don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach of first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. Anyway, so that's
and then I think the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have, yeah, you don't have kids. Your obligations. Well, sorry. Probably don't have kids. But as you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. Thank you. And I was trying to think what would most influence the future. What are the problems that we have to solve? And I actually talked a lot to friends and my housemates and that kind of thing, and dates, which was maybe not the best thing. So, yeah. Actually met a woman I dated briefly in college, who now works at Scientific American as a writer, and she related the anecdote that we went on a date. All I was talking about was electric cars. That was not a winning conversation.
So it was a bit of a monologue, was it?
Yeah, she said she said the first question I asked her was, "Do you ever think about electric cars?" She said, "No." She never does.
So you learn from that. That wasn't the best shout-out line.
Wasn't great.
That's
But
great.
it has recently it's been more effective.
There you go. I know this man.
So when I was thinking of like what I thought would affect the world as a student, it wasn't really from the standpoint of those are the things I'll get involved in. It was kind of more in the abstract. These are the things I think will happen that will affect the world, but not that I will be involved in them. As it turns out, I have. But I always thought that we would make much more progress in space, and it just didn't happen. It was really disappointing. So. Yeah, I was really quite bothered by it. So, when we went to the moon, we were supposed to have a base on the moon. We were supposed to send people to Mars, and that stuff just didn't happen. We went backwards. We got the space shuttle, but the space shuttle could only go to low Earth orbit, whereas Saturn V could go to the moon. Now the space shuttle's gone, and so that just seemed like a really bad thing. So. I thought, well, maybe it was a question of there not being enough attention or will to do this. But this was a wrong assumption. So, but that's the reason for the greenhouse idea. The thought was if there could be sort of a small philanthropic mission to Mars. So I was expecting to lose all the money that I invested in that. But if we could send a small greenhouse to the surface of Mars with seeds in dehydrated nutrient gel, and you hydrate it upon landing, and you'd have this great shot of little greenhouse with little green plants on a red background. I thought that would get people excited.
So you literally imagined a photograph inspiring a new
Yeah,
generation?
you got to sort of imagine the money shot, if you will. So yeah, I think green plants and red background would be that. And people tend to get interested and excited about precedents and superlatives. So this would be the furthest that life's ever traveled, the first life on Mars, as far as we know. And I thought, well, maybe that would result in a bigger budget for NASA, and then we could sort of resume the journey. That was the basic idea.